Hello, my YouTube family and friends. This is James Wilcox Jr. and I am back on again. Pretty excited to be back on YouTube. It's been a minute, but I'm back. And today I am going to talk about how to interview or the questions you should ask when interviewing a pastor. I'm coming up with this topic because I was talking to a friend and she was telling me rather, the criteria they were using to interview a pastor. And it was very slim. All they wanted to know is what is your experience? Um, can you preach? Can you come by our church and give us a demonstration of your preaching? And what are your requirements for compensation? That was it. I was like, wow. Now I am floored because when we're looking for a doctor, we want to know, is the doctor board certified? How many people have died under this particular person? What is his education? Where did he go to school? We want to know these things because we know that our life could depend on this person. And it's a delicate balance between life and death, and you may live depending upon the doctor. However, when it comes to a pastor, which is very important because not only is this person going to be a guide for you to live life on earth, but hopefully and prayerfully, he's going to help you in your journey to heaven, the afterlife. So I think that's very important than a medical doctor that just helps you to live here. I mean, I could be wrong, but it kind of disturbed me. So these are some questions, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I'm pretty versed in it. And these are some questions you should ask a pastor who may be interested in pastoring your church. Now we know the basics. We want to know, what is your spiritual journey? Are you saved? Do you love God? How long have you been a Christian? And when did God call you to preach? And how long you've been doing that? That's a given. Those are some things that you should ask. So those are givens. Given. They are something that you should do. But the first question I would ask is, if we were to bring you on as a pastor, are you willing to do 2 to 3 months of probation so we can get to know you and you can get to know us? And if we're both happy with the situation, you're in. If not, we can go on our separate ways, no harm, no foul. I think that's extremely important. If that pastor is confident and he has the right intent, usually it will be a yes. So I think that's extremely important. The next thing you should ask that pastor is, are you willing to do a police background check and a background check period? And I think that's extremely important. I think that you should know who is going to be ministering in your pulpit. Not because we are thinking the worst of people, but in this day and age of child molesters and con artists, and you need to know. And I think that a church is really in for a rude awakening if they do not do a police report. And it should be said that this will not deter you from getting a job or not. But if we do hire you, at least we know what's going on and we're not being blindsided by something later down the line. And I think that's extremely important. I think it's fair. Um, I would call the church or the churches where this pastor has served, first of all, to get some references that are not put on the paper by the pastor, but then I would ask that pastor for references from those churches. It is very important to know what he did at those other churches. There are always going to be some sour apples or some people who did not like the pastor, so keep that in mind. Be balanced and fair. Be able to discern when somebody is bitter because they didn't get their way, but also be able to discern when something may be a problem. And I think asking for references and calling the churches is extremely important, so you know how he operated or she operated in those churches. Extremely important. The next thing is you should ask, what is your short-term goal for the church and what is your long-term goal and how do you plan to get there? Very important question. You need to know the vision and the plan that God is going to set for this man or woman of God who's going to be over the church. And I think you should go back and ask that question again after the probation period, because that gives the pastor enough time to really assess some of the needs of the church. You should ask that pastor about his educational background. It is extremely important. This is personal, and I don't say all churches have to do this, but I'm extremely leery and a red flag goes up when a pastor gives me an educational institution that is not accredited. A red flag goes up. When somebody is a doctor, but their school does not have regional accreditation. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. I went to United Theological Seminary to finish my doctorate of ministry. That allowed me to teach at a public, private, for-profit, or not-for-profit college. Also, my college is accredited by the Association of Theological Schools, America and Canada. That allows me to preach at almost any denomination. So regional accreditation is important, and you need to have that person produce transcripts. You need to check the Council of Higher Education Association, I believe, CHIA for short, and that will show you all of the accredited schools, even seminaries. So if you don't have that tool, that's a tool that you need. Some denominations don't require it, and that's fine, but I think it's needed because it comes right into my next line of questioning. Are you a preaching pastor and an administrative pastor? And what I mean by that is some pastors are great at preaching, but they are not good in administration, meaning management. And so that's when you have to think. If your church is a large church, you may need a preaching, teaching pastor, and you may need an administrative pastor. One pastor to deal with the needs of the people, the other pastors to deal with the operational issues, paying the bills, making sure that funds are going. Some pastors can do it all. Some pastors cannot. So you really need to ask that question. If there's any church projects that pastor has done, what are they? Was it on budget? Was it on time? Gotta ask those questions. When it comes to the pastors. And with that said, you ask them, what is your management style? How do you manage the people of God? Extremely important. You need to ask the pastor that because you may not like that style. It may not be what you're used to. If you're used to a more hands-off approach and the pastor is trusting, that's great. But if this pastor is a micromanager, then that may cause some problems. So you really need to ask those questions. Then you need to ask, what do you need for as compensation? and you get what you pay for. I really believe that you get what you pay for. And sometimes we go through a lot of things because we don't want to compensate people who may have management skills, very anointed with the word. And it's not all about hooping and hollering. That really surprised me that these people were happy because he could preach and sing. The pastor could preach and sing. Well, that's great that he can preach and sing. But at the end of the day, where are the people? How are they going to grow? How do you plan to help the church grow physically and spiritually? How are you going to grow our youth ministry? What are your plans for the youth ministry? That's very important because we don't think about youth ministry, but youth they're going to be the leaders. And when you go and you pray to God that your youth have been trained adequately. So you want a pastor that looks at all aspects of the administration. When it comes to finances, how are we going to do this? I think it's fair to be transparent in financial dealings. When you're dealing with people's money, you want to be transparent. So no checks can be cashed unless 3 people sign off on it, because those people have to give accountability. And if a pastor is leery about that, then you need to ask yourself a question. Are you trying to control finances? What are you trying to do? You have to ask yourself those questions. I think as a pastor, it's almost like a marriage. As that person is more trustworthy and you know the person a little bit more, then things may be handed over. But, you're getting to know each other at the beginning. And I think that's very, very important. What do you plan for the physical church, the building? What is your take on the building? I would want to know, how does the pastor feel about the appearance of the building? What is your plans for the community? I think it's very important that a pastor is community oriented, that they're dealing with the school system and the police departments, and they should have the feel for social justice. Ask that pastor that, and fellowshipping with others. Very important in that space. Where will you be living? Is the church going to provide a parsonage, or how does that work? Another thing, are you going to be a bivocational pastor? Will you have a job? Will we have to take care of everything? So these are some other questions you need to ask. How do you like your form of worship? What kind of worship are you used to? Can you tell me how your former churches worship? If you're coming out of a Church of God in Christ, going to AME church, depending on which AME church you're going to, there may be some conflicts in how you want to do church services. And I think all worship is ordained by God when it's true worship. But some people may be different. Some people may want very high worship with a pipe organ, and some people may want a Hammond B3 and run all day and shout all night. It depends, but you need to know this. How do you feel about fundraisers? Personally, I don't think you should have fundraisers. I think that there should be pledges, and people should do what they need to do financially for the churches. But you need to ask those questions. You do need to ask questions about doctrine. The biggest thing is, though, how do you really study the Word? And I think that, again, this is very near and dear to my heart. I don't think people should see the Word in rose-colored glasses. I look at the Word according to the text and what it says, and I look at all aspects of it: culture, ancient versus modern, Is it poetry? Who wrote the book? All of those things play into right interpretation. I truly believe right interpretation brings right transformation. So, it may be good to get someone who thinks outside the box, but inside the Word of God. Very important. Um, and so is that person with excellence? How do they feel about the music ministry? There are some pastors who believe that the word is the most important thing and music should be secondary. There are some pastors who feel that all aspects of worship are important. So you have to ask yourself those questions for these people coming up. Those are just a few off the top of my head, you know. And I think those things are important. How do you feel about pulpits? Some people don't want that heavy wood lectern up on the stage. Some people may want a clear plexiglass podium that can be moved. Some people want the church to be used as a multi functional type of building, where some people think it's just sacred and you shouldn't have certain things in there. I mean, so you have to ask these things, and I think the more questions you ask, the more you can get out of the person. And I think it's extremely important. You need to ask about family. It's okay to have people who are single as pastors, or I know people don't want that headache if they think that's a headache, but some people are dedicated to the Lord. But you want to check everyone. I mean, I just think it's extremely important that you ask the right questions. And I think the biggest thing is the education. How do you plan to implement Christian education? What is your vision for that? And you listen and you write. And I think the more the person expresses their vision, I think the more questions that will pop up. And if there's any issues, you can really address those. But we can't hire adequate people in ministry without asking the right questions. And I think that's extremely important. I hope this has helped somebody. I know this is kind of basic, this is off the top of my head, but I really have prayed about these things. I have had to hire teachers, and they had to give a teaching demonstration, and that's extremely important. The teaching demonstration is extremely important, but I'm asking them questions. What if? Behavior questions are very important. Name a time when you had a difficult situation in the church. Tell me what it was. How did you handle it? And what were the results? That will tell you a lot too. The behavior questions that I can't think of the correct name right now, but I want to know what you did, not what you would do. Name a time when the church had a difficult time with money. Tell me what you did and what were the results. I think those questions will help you a lot to get the right answers as well. You want to use a variety of things, and you don't want to scare people away, but you got to realize that it's a marriage. Once you say you're good and we hired you, then that's who you have to live with. And I think you have to do due diligence. And if something goes awry, at least you can say to yourself, we did our due diligence to make sure we got the right person. And I think those behavior questions are extremely important. Name a time when an auxiliary had odds with another auxiliary. What was the problem? And how did you handle it? What were the results? And it will really give you an insight of how the person thinks. And I think it's extremely important that you ask those questions. I hope this has helped someone. I have done this quite a bit. I also do church consulting. I'm just not here just to flap out at the gums, but I really do church consulting in this area and helping churches actually to become better. And so I really take this type of stuff seriously. My name is James Wilcox. And I am just happy to be before you. Hopefully this video has helped someone. I don't know if one is out there, but I think it's extremely important that you look at these things and ask the pastor the right questions. Don't be afraid to ask the right questions. If the pastor that will try to, you know, be employed at your church is a person that is confident in himself or herself, then this won't be an issue. If they're not intimidated by people asking, when people get intimidated by you asking them questions or they get agitated, then that's a sign right there. But when someone knows who they are in Christ, when they are confident in their work and what God has gifted them to do, you shouldn't have any problem. You shouldn't have any problem. They understand, or they should understand, that you're trying to get the best candidate. And it then tells them that this church is serious about ministry. But when you don't do your due diligence, then people already know that, okay, I can understand. And what this line of interviewing will do is weed out people who want to use the church as a personal bank account or try to have a kingdom within the church. So I hope this has helped you. And if you have any questions, please send me a message or leave a comment. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. I could be wrong, but I don't get intimidated by your feedback, and I ask for it. I hope you all are blessed, and thank you again for tuning in.